Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I of course would like to discuss The Last of Us Season 2, and also Part 2, since that's where we are in terms of the adaptation for the show from the game. Of course, Episode 2, for me it was, what the heck is today? I don't even know what day it is. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday for me, so you guys seeing this tomorrow. But of course it was over the weekend, and I didn't watch Episode 1. I was like, well, he didn't die in Episode 1. I would have known about that because everybody would have been flipping out on the internet. So I'm like, all right, he's not dead yet. I'll watch Episode 2. It's got to be Episode 2. It's like about the same amount of time. You get about 2 hours in the game or so, and same sort of situation. And I was excited. And admittedly, I did check because I started the episode like super late anyway, even the first episode. And so I was like, let me just check like 2.5 seconds on Twitter, and I just saw one post of somebody being like, me trying to save Joel, and I was like, yep, it's in Episode 2. I'm good, because I screwed up when I was watching Daredevil. I thought Episode 8 was the finale, and I hadn't watched since like the second week of the effing show. So I binge watched like the entire show, and then I found out like after I finished that the season finale was the next week, and I was pissed. And I was like, I have to just look it up so I don't waste my time right now, because I was starting like after 9 p.m. on Episode 1. I was like, I'm not gonna do it unless it's, it actually happens. And fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, it happened. And so I just wanted to talk about it, because it's, it's the talk of the town right now. They just, full golf pro. And I liked it. I enjoyed the show. For me personally, I would say this from my perspective, and you can watch my whole playthrough of the game if you guys are interested, but I actually love the second game. I like the second game way more than I like the first game. I like the first game a lot, but I would say I actually do love the second game. Like, I really enjoyed the first one, and I bought it day one because I'm a big Uncharted fan, so it was like, well, the Uncharted people are making a horror game. And I was like, well, then I'm 100% buying that. So I bought it day one. I still have it on my PS3. Not that my PS3 even works anymore, but still have it for PS3. And I played through it, I want to say 2 times. I think I played through the whole game twice, and then of course, spend a lot of time online with factions, and then that was it. And I have yet to like experience the first game since then. Like, no joke, I haven't played the first game, or at least story-wise, I should say. I haven't played the first game since it was, I don't know, maybe 6 or so months out after it happened. Like, I beat the game fairly fast, and then I played through it again at some point, and then that was it. And like I said, most of the time after that was just playing online. So for me, it was like, all right, well, I haven't played in forever. And then 2 was finally announced, and then 2 finally came out during the ye old virus. And I loved it. I was like, okay. And of course, this is going into the element of, being on the gaming side of things. Obviously, for this episode, I knew what was going to happen. And then, for the game, I also kind of knew. I didn't technically know the spoilers, but everybody was bitching so hard that it clearly, I was like, it's obviously going to be that he dies, because everybody was whining so much. So I was like, I don't technically know what happened, but I'm pretty sure everyone's like just mad because he's dead. So it kind of ruined it for me, because I was like, I'm pretty sure he's going to die. And so of course, that's what ended up happening. And I was like, dang, that sucks that he died. And I was still shocked when it happened, because even though I was like, I'm pretty sure this is it, I didn't know enough. I still didn't know that Abby was Abby, because like the first running theory I remember when the game first came out was people thought Abby might have been Ellie's mom, and it was like the scene in the forest. People were like, oh, maybe it was a flashback. And so I still didn't even know that. I didn't know who Abby was or anything. I was just like, maybe that's her mom. Like, I don't really know. I don't actually know if I'm playing during the same time period or not. And then it was like, oh no, this is happening at the same time. And then I was like, oh. Like, the wheel started turning, and then of course they got in that room, and it was like, here we go. And it was sad. It was sad that happened. But then I loved the game after that. I love, obviously it depends on how you feel about the story and stuff. But once again, you guys can check out my full journey on that if you guys even give a crap. You can watch my full playthrough of The Last of Us Part 2. But it's been years now. It's been 5 years at this point, almost 5. And I've been waiting for this episode. And I was like, all right, what's gonna happen? We got season 2, episode 1 came out, didn't hear any madness, so I was like, it didn't happen yet. But I was like, episode 2 is the one, and I waited, and I watched it, and both episodes I thought were good. Definitely some changes, so I do wanna kind of just go through a little bit of the changes, just because I have so much experience, with the games, even though I'm, I'm certainly not like the biggest fan. I guess if I was, I'd be more offended maybe, who knows? But I think it's interesting how they changed Ellie. I don't know if I like it as much, and a lot of people have mentioned that. I definitely kind of feel the same way about her character in this version of the story, where it's like, oh, she feels a little bit different, and not as, like, oddly enough, she feels more like away from people. And they put definitely a bit of a focus on it. And it's not like that. It doesn't feel like that nearly as much in the game, but in the show, they definitely say like, oh, you're a part of the community now. And people laugh about it and stuff. Like, that's how distant she really is from everybody. But in the game, it really does only feel like she's just distant from Joel specifically. And at least that's how I took it. I mean, honestly, you obviously don't get to see as many people. You know, you don't spend as much time in the city either. And of course, with the way they do things, you don't have the event of, you know, the dance and all that stuff. We literally don't see that until the end of the game. We don't see them, you know, we still haven't seen it, so I won't spoil that just in case. But, you know, there are things that happen. And they even reference it though. They do reference it, but we'll, you know, I'm sure we'll see it later. But they reference, you know, Ellie being like, hey, you know, Joel and I are cool, like we're figuring it out and all that stuff. And she even talks about like, oh, we'll do like daddy-daughter time or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting way to do it. I thought the change made sense. And, you know, this is where the giant debate comes in for the game versus the show, where some people have been like, all right, well, the death of Joel, when you do it in the game, it's like, well, who the F is this lady? Who is Abby? Like, who is Abby, Mel, and her friends, including like the 2 or 3 people that they totally took out of the show, which makes sense. I mean, the one dude, which it does suck, maybe they can just do it with one of the other characters, but the knife sequence, where like Dina comes in to save Ellie, that's actually one of my favorite parts of the game, because I thought they were going to kill Dina in the like super early in the game, and I was like, holy crap. So I actually really like that segment of the game, and it's like, dang, that was actually one of my favorite sequences like throughout the whole story. So I'm like, I hope we still get that and they just swap the character, but that's all that guy does. And then one of the other people that's there is like one of the women, she literally dies from something totally different. You don't even interact with her, and you just find her dead already. So it's like, it makes sense that they cut those 2 characters, because they don't do much. They die so fast, one of which literally dies off screen. It's like, yeah, it makes sense. They just cut it down to the people that actually continually show up throughout the rest of the game. So I was fine with them cutting those characters, but them going through and even episode 1 popping up, and it was like, oh, it's starting literally, for those of you who might be watching this who haven't played the game, which I do not recommend, by the way. Like, be very careful about that, because despite the many changes, there's still like the overall spoilers that can happen, I promise you, can still happen. So do not continue to watch this if you don't know. I'll try my best, but you know, I don't recommend doing that for people that are like, you know, I played the game in this comparison. If someone has enough knowledge to compare the games, you're risking, you know, ruining some important elements in the show for sure, especially with the way this story goes. I'm very curious how. There's other scenes that are, you know, this is like the big one, but let's be honest, there are some other scenes where I'm like, what is the internet gonna say then? So there's some other scenes I'm actually looking way more forward to by the time, like based on what they've said about splitting the game, if they end where I assume they're going to end on this season, that's going to be a wild finale. Like, people are not, like, it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be fascinating to say the least. But the fact that they showed so much stuff from Abby, and like they give her background, they find out that, you know, the doctor of course was her dad and all that stuff. I like that idea. I thought it was good because it gives her motivation early on. I know some people don't like that idea and they like the twist, which I thought was really interesting. It's clear who they are, but the fact that her dad was the doctor, people were like, oh, they gave away that twist. I'm like, was that a twist? I mean, maybe I'll have to go back and watch my own thing, but I don't think I was like, oh my God, her dad was the doctor. I don't remember that being a twist to me. It was like, well, he killed her dad. He was one of the people that was there. And I guess, you know, them specifying that it was the actual doctor was meant to be a twist. But for me, it was like, well, they were part of the Firefly. So it didn't even occur to me that it was meant to be a big deal, that it was her dad. It was like, well, she was there and they were people. Like, you know, that's all it really took for me. So I guess in my head, it didn't make much of a difference. I didn't even remember that counting as a twist in the game. So please remind me if that was actually meant to be a big deal, because I'm telling you, I don't remember that being a twist, but apparently it was. So that kind of shocked me when I read some of those comments, like, oh, that was a twist? I don't remember that when I played the game. It was like, oh, you know, like, it was clear, like, once they kind of did this stuff where it's like, you know, you saved your speech or whatever, and it was like, okay, these are the Fireflies. Also, may have had something to do with like me doing my best to avoid spoilers, but still kind of knowing he died. I'm like, okay, it's totally got to be because they came after him because of, you know, whatever. Like, he figured out they were Fireflies, and I was like, oh, they're revenge for the hospital. The whole dad component didn't elevate things for me. So, you know, that's personal perspective. It was just people coming to kill because he killed people, and that was it. So for me, it wasn't much of a twist anyway, so I wasn't concerned about that. But the fact that we do know her motives, I'm curious how, it's so hard to say, because for me, I wasn't bothered anyway when it happened in the game, and of course there were a million other idiotic issues that made people super mad about it. You know, the whole trans thing where people were wrong and they thought Abby was trans. I mean, people still say it, but you know how it is. And so people were super pissed about like many different things that were completely wrong, even when like we thought the story was leaked. Because I went back and watched all those old videos after I finally beat the game to see, you know, what the leaks actually were. And there was so much stuff that was completely wrong about it, but there was some stuff that was right. And I almost wonder, and I've always said, The Last of Us Part 2 100% would have gone over better if the pacing was different. And I still believe that to this day. And I genuinely believe the pacing that they did for the show, where they introduced Abby and her backstory, I think is a better way to do it, where it just flows better for the story. There's a million other elements as well, like the whole Seattle experience, I think is just can be better done and will probably be way more entertaining in the show, because I kind of hate the fact that they do the split down the middle. I hated that. It didn't make me like hate the game, but it made me mad because I love where, you know, where I assume the show is going to end is going to be the theater. I love that moment so much, and my heart was racing, and it was like the worst de-escalation ever, where it just stops and then you just start all over, and it's like, I hate that. I was enjoying them regardless of how scared I was that they were gonna kill like everybody might die, I don't effing know. But the fact that I was so hyped for that moment and then it cuts like that is what makes me hate that. Like, I had no issues playing as Abby. My only problem was I just don't care right now. I want to see what happens next in this moment. It was like having an episode end and then you have to watch, it was like being in the first episode of a season or something, but the season finale, it was like the season finale was shown at the very beginning, and then it's like, all right, well, we'll show you the rest of the season finale at the end of the season. It's like, why did you just do that? That's how I felt when I first played that game, because I love that moment so much. So I think the pacing is going to be a lot better in the show, and I think them introducing Abby early on and showing her motives is definitely like a bit of a better perspective. Granted, it still happened so fast, I don't think there's that much of a difference. I say for me personally, the main thing is going to be to see how the rest of the season goes with them swapping back and forth between the characters. If they even decide to do that, that'll be very fascinating. Because if it sticks to the game 100%, I'm very curious how people are going to feel about that. But for me, especially considering they've already done it, they've shown the flashbacks themselves, even though it's not the same flashback, because it wasn't with her dad. It was still separate. It was just a different flashback, but they clearly showed like, hey, they're at the hospital and this is what's happening. So them changing that so that you get her perspective, and you know, they gave her like a full monologue where she actually explains everything. Like, you know, I actually love the line where it's like the nurses said you barely even looked at him before you killed him. I actually thought that was a fantastic line. If they kind of shrunk some of the stuff down, they could have kept the thing in with Joel, you know, because they didn't have the part where they let her explain it, so that, you know, I think that was once again kind of one of the changes TV-wise, where they let the explanation happen versus the game where it was like, even Joel cut it off at the very beginning. Like, he figured out they were fireflies and was like, all right, do what you got to do. Let's, like, don't keep wasting my time, bitch. So, you know, like, it went longer, and then eventually he still cuts her off when she was trying to give her whole explanation. And he's like, just, you know, fucking do it already. So I was like, okay, they still let him have his moment in there, but TV-wise, they still went through like the big exposition dump and let her go through everything, be like, okay, here's her motives and all this stuff. And I personally enjoyed that. I like having the element of being like, oh, we know why this happened from the very beginning. And I thought it was actually kind of cool, because it's like, you know what happened. And they even somewhat address it where they talk about like, oh, the rumor of, you know, with Ellie being immune. That part I find kind of interesting, and it'll be, you know, of course, there's another sequence coming up. One of the talk about moments. I'm excited to see that done, to see that scene get acted out in general. But I'm looking forward to that moment for sure. But the way they handled the death, I thought was actually pretty good. I do think I enjoyed it more, even outside of knowing the motives in advance. Because once again, for me personally, I didn't really care. It was just like, okay, he died, and you know, you figure out everything you need to figure out, and then they just add details later on. And it's kind of that element, that weird twisting of like the sympathy thing where, you know, and that's of course a huge element of the game itself where people, kind of hate it for that, where they say like, oh, the game tries to force you to really like Abby and stuff like that, which I never thought made any sense, but I would love to know your opinions on it. I was like, every time I hear somebody say that, I'm like, I feel like you guys don't really, I don't know, that doesn't make any sense to me when the game literally has her own friends calling her an asshole and just everything she does. I'm like, I don't understand how people are like, the game tries to force you to like Abby. I'm like, I kind of feel the exact opposite. If anything, I think the game kind of continuously proves the exact opposite as to why you shouldn't like Abby. It's really just showing you, it's just, hey, here's some people. Let's see what happens. You think whatever you think. You like what you like, and you don't like what you don't like. And the characters are the same way, and that's just how the story unfolds. So I've always enjoyed it, but I am curious how the pacing is going to really affect it going forward. But, as far as the, full golf pro swing that they did, which also did air during, this was mentioned, but it's worth saying again, it was aired during the beginning of the Masters, which is absolutely hilarious coincidence. If it was a coincidence, they may never admit it, but it's like, that's some fascinating timing you got there. Very fascinating. They knew. They totally knew. They knew 100%. They were like, we're going to do this on the Masters. They did it. I refuse to believe that was a coincidence. I like to think that they were just very dark about it, and that's hilarious to me. So I'm going to go with the option of they 100% did it on purpose, because that's really dark. That's an effed up thing to do, and that makes it funnier to me. So that's what I'm going with. But I like the episode. I love the changes as far as what they did, with the switching of the characters, because I was curious how that was going to play out, where it was like, oh, so they have, they build more of a connection between Dina and Joel, which I thought was super cool. And I was like, okay, and she was always kind of, even in the game, she was just like, all right, I'm kind of teaming up, with Ellie, and they'd go out because it's like, hey, I lost my dad, and she's like, all right, I'm with you. And then they are both kind of gung-ho. I felt like they made them way more gung-ho, like episode 1 for sure, where they were going into the building. I was like, they feel more gung-ho. I always felt like, Dina was the one that was slightly more reserved, but at the same time, she wasn't. Like, they both went like really, really fast. They instantaneously went, and that was pretty much all there was to it. It was like, Tommy took off, and then they were like, all right, well, we're going super fast, and that was pretty much it. So it's not like she was really, slowing her down or not really a part of things, but it was interesting having that moment where they, kind of rush into the building, and it's just like, oh, they just seem so lackadaisical about it. So I thought that was interesting, and it's one of those interesting pseudo personality shifts, like just a little bit. It's just a little bit more amped up than it was in the game. So I thought that was interesting during that sequence, which was also a cool moment, introducing the stalker in that, and then another one of the big changes where they go into the element of like they're evolving and stuff like that. And in the game, it's just like, well, that's just one of the other ones, and there's no evolution to it. It's just they have different types. So I thought that was interesting. I thought they were going to take it even further, if I'm being honest. I thought they were going to have the thing actually like whimper, like it was going to be the witch from Left 4 Dead or something. Like, I thought for sure that's how it was going to end up playing out, and it was like, oh, they didn't do that. But I like that segment. I thought that was cool. I love the change of Ellie having to actually like cut the bite wound. I was like, that's actually super cool, because they didn't have that in the game. And then she has to like cut the wound to make it look like, oh yeah, I got stabbed or I cut myself or whatever, to hide that it was a bite mark. And I was like, oh, that's actually really cool, because that wasn't, they don't get into stuff like that in the game. So I thought that was a nice change. That was just like a cool little addition where she has to like do certain things like that. And I was like, oh, that's actually a nice little change that I never really thought of during the game, because golf pros come in and then you got to track people down. So I like that little change. I like the little stalker moment. There's another stalker moment, of course, in the game, which I would love to see, but I have no idea how they would actually film that, because that's such an insane moment just from a visual perspective, and everything that happens during that little stalker moment with Ellie. I have no idea if we should expect that sequence. Of course, there's like the little hotel sequence before that. I don't know if we should expect that either, but for now, episodes 1 and 2 I thought were pretty good. I love the entire panic inside the city and everything, and they get swarmed, and Tommy fights off. Tommy performs the greatest. Is probably the most accurate portrayal I've ever seen of chip damage. He used the flamethrower, and it was garbage, of course, because that's what flamethrowers are like. they look cool, but they barely ever do damage. It takes forever. And then as the thing's about to get him, that extra little fire damage that was still on it finally kills it, right as, you know, he runs out of ammo and he thinks he's dead, and then it finally gets him. I'm like, man, they just showed a 100% accurate version of chip damage, and that was absolutely amazing. So I did love that sequence for multiple reasons, but that also made me laugh really hard, because I was like, wow, that was such a video game moment. 100%, the last little embers that were on it took off those last ticks of HP, and it died right in front of him. And I was like, that is probably the most accurate thing I've ever seen in a video game adaptation in my life, where it's like, this is, I don't think I've ever seen a video game moment portrayed so well, where I actually was like, wow, I didn't play that, but that was the exact feeling I get when I play video games. And it's like, I'm on my last little bit, especially when it's the flamethrower, and specifically that enemy, because when they put him in the first game, you can do the flamethrower. I think in the second one, man, I feel like you only fight the big guy like one time in the second game, and it's during the flashback sequence, and you don't have the flamethrower during that. I could be wrong, there's probably more than that, but that's definitely, in the first game for sure, that was always the move, where it was like, throw some Molotovs and just keep moving around, because this dude he doesn't stop. You hit him a couple times, you move to another segment, hit him a couple times, run around the gym a little bit. So that was a beautiful portrayal of what it feels like to play a video game. It was probably the most accurate thing we've ever had. But I love that sequence, and I love that switch of Tommy being a part, you know, a bigger, you know, the leader, of course, of the town and everything, and that swap between the two of them, and having Dina be there. And so it also adds to her fueling the fire of her wanting to be like, yeah, I'm definitely going with you, because she was there and couldn't stop it. So I definitely like that little change. It was simple, because it still goes the same way, but it just changes the motivation. Tommy was already his brother, so it was like, it doesn't matter what happens, he's gonna go after who killed his brother. That's automatic. And then with Dina, you give her even more motivation to be a part of just, you know, all the madness that happens throughout the story. So I like that change. I thought that was pretty cool. And like I said, them doing the backstory and stuff, you know, once again, that's up to everybody. Like I said, I didn't even realize it was meant to be an effing twist. I don't remember that in any way, shape, or form being a twist that her dad was the doctor. It was just like, okay, they're fireflies. He killed a bunch of fireflies. The fact that it was her dad, I just don't remember being a twist. But, you know, I can understand if people felt like that shouldn't have been shown early on. But at the same time, you still hate her. I feel like the effect is just, you get a bit more, I don't know if nuance is really the right term. I can't really say you get like more nuance out of knowing early on, but at the same time, I guess you do. I guess nuance is the right term, because in the game, it's just like, you figure it out once he's like, you guys fireflies, you know, you can kind of tell what happened there. But in the show, the exact explanation of, well, I got to kill you because you killed my dad, and then obviously we know that, you know, Joel killed her dad, so she kills him, but he's Ellie's dad. And so you instantly get that connection between the characters, and like, okay, you get the exact lineage of this cycle of violence. So, you know, for me, it's hard to say which was better or which was worse, 100%. And of course, they're so different, you know, it's different mediums and different ways you tell stories anyway, because I don't know if that would have worked in the game. I feel like so many people were so pissed to begin with that it almost, you know, it's interesting, like the people that were so mad, I feel like those people would enjoy the fact that they would feel like the story was told a little bit better this way, because I felt like that was another big part of it, where it's like, you're just playing, I just hate this person, I don't know why, why she did it, I don't care. But at the same time, I don't think even knowing would have made much of a difference, because she killed Joel. So, you know, it's kind of just up in the air about that, like, what is better, what is worse, because there's so much more to knowing the fact about, you know, the specific dad element that applies to just why she did it. Because once it's revenge, it's like, okay, well, it's revenge. You know, I don't really need extra details. It's like that revenge is all you take. Like, you know, of course, adding the detail of like, you killed one of my parents, that's different. I will say, I kind of wish that changed the, oh God, the nightmares that she has, where she sees her dad. That I do wish that they changed, because they made it where it was her going to see her dad, but it was also her present self talking to her, and they don't do that in the game. It's just her constantly having the nightmare, and that's like the one change where I'm like, I think that they should have saved for the end, because them doing that throughout the game, I thought was such a cool moment, because I'm sure they're gonna keep repeating, you know, the flashback or, you know, the nightmare, but I liked it better where like you just play it over and over again, and it's just her dad dead on the ground. It's her dad dead on the ground. Then it changes later in the game, and then it's like, oh, okay. And then of course, you know, it clears up, so to speak, towards the end of the game. But I think that's something, that's probably like the one change that I don't like 100%, because I like the element of them showing that. Because you don't get the nightmare until you start playing as Abby, if I'm not mistaken. They don't do that like in the beginning. Like, you know, they show it and that's how she wakes up. And maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe it was like the very first time she actually did it, but it wasn't a nightmare, if I'm not mistaken. It was like when she actually does it for the first time is when you play it. But in the show, they made it where it starts off as like, oh, this is one of her nightmares. And then it's her talking to herself. And it's like, oh, they don't do that in the game. And of course, you know, the element of this is the past her and the present her, but she looks the same because obviously she's not like super buff right now. So of course that element does play into it for sure. And it's like, oh, they kind of, for me personally, that's the one thing where I'm like, they kind of made it a little bit worse to me. I'm trying to do the element of like, man, I don't even know who you are. And it's like, oh, you know, she doesn't, you know, the physicality of it. That's the only time I think that actually would have made much of a difference, because of course she's not going to be running and punching like in the video game. So I wasn't bothered that the actress isn't going to be buff like Abby from the game. That didn't matter to me, because I'm like, okay, well, she's only buff like that because even though that's the motivation for her to be buff, if they're changing like slight elements of the story, then it really only applies mostly due to the fact that it's specifically for gameplay purposes. Like, they make it into the story, but you can easily just swap the story, just like they did, where she's not buff or anything. And it's like, the story plays out exactly the same. The only reason that was even really that relevant is because it was like, well, you kind of have to do it for gameplay purposes, otherwise she plays exactly like Ellie does. So for me, it didn't matter, but the fact that they were kind of showing this like difference, if you want to call it that, between the past version and current version of her, is like, yeah, that would have worked better. Like, this is probably the one time that it actually would have mattered if you had a character that was buff. Even though they couldn't have made her skinnier, you know, I guess, you know, film it earlier or shrink her down a bit with CG, I guess. But I was like, yeah, that's probably the one weird addition where it's like, you already changed it to where she's not as buff. So to have it where she still just looks the same is a weird thing to change up that nightmare. Just have it be her going through the nightmare, and then, because I think the way it plays out in the game is what makes it so good, because you're just like, okay, she just keeps having this nightmare, but you realize even after she killed Joel, she still has that nightmare. So had they just done, like, you know, like I said, the normal version of the nightmare, or just the flashback of it, I think that could have worked. And then you just play that a couple times throughout the story, maybe only like 2 times, because they do it quite a few times in the game, but it works in the game because it's like hours and hours apart. Obviously in the show it won't be nearly as much because it's only like 5 more episodes left actually. But that was definitely the one change where I was like, I don't like this as much. I like the idea that she just has this nightmare and she keeps going towards the door, and that's it. I will say, them changing the fact that you don't see her walk in, but you just hear her screams in the background, I will say that was a nice touch. That was a nice touch. You hear like the past version of her experiencing it all over again, or, you know, experiencing it for the first time, and then the older version of her is experiencing it all over again. And I was like, okay, that was a nice change to it, but I still wish it was kind of the way that it was in the game, where she's just going through it. And maybe we will still see it multiple times, who knows? But that was, like I said, the one, still a bit of a nitpick more than anything else, but that was like the one minute change where I was like, I don't like that change as much as I do the other ones that they did, where it's like, okay, it kind of fits, you know. I didn't have an issue with them saying their names. When it came to the video game, I didn't care enough that it was like this giant deal, but they did solve that problem much better in the show, I will say that for sure. But overall, I enjoyed it. I liked episode 1. Episode 2 I thought was fantastic. Just from the perspective of knowing it, and also everything that they changed as well, I thought was pretty cool. And we'll see what happens. I don't even know if I'm gonna watch the rest of the season personally, because I'm like, they're gonna split it up, and I already know that they're splitting it up because they said that they were. And I was like, all right, well, I already lived that through the game, and I could do that immediately. To have to just wait another year, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I might just avoid all spoilers. Maybe I'll catch up, you know, at some point, you know, because I'll be curious to see how they adapted and how characters end up doing the things that they do. And some of the moments, like, man, they got to be saving up a buttload of money for the hospital, right? They have to, because they have no choice but to put that in the show. They can't skip that. So they're saving that up. That'll be season 3 for sure. But I'm excited to see how things play out, especially if they're going through, you know, doing it just like the game did it. I'm excited to see that, where, you know, the kind of back and forth. And that's one of the few things where it's like, that kind of worked in the game. But at the same time, everybody plays games at different paces. I played through it fairly quick, so I remembered things. It was like, oh, we're going through the same segment. Oh, they're literally playing the same music right now, but it's like slower or whatever. I'm very curious how it'll work with the show. It'll be easier to do it, but at the same time, I don't know. It's so hard to tell. I'm very curious. That's probably the one thing that's gonna make me keep watching week to week. It's just wanting to see, are they gonna mix up what they did in the game? Because I've always thought that was the #1 problem. More than anything else, I thought the pacing of just, it's all, you know, a little bit of Abby, a little bit of Ellie, and then it's all Ellie for like a million years, and then you just cut, and then it's all Abby for a million years. I was like, yeah, that should have been split up. I feel like the story would have been more entertaining even if it was going back and forth and it's like, wait, I was here earlier. Oh, I did this thing. Oh, she doesn't know about this thing. I think that actually would have been more fun to play myself, just experiencing that story piece by piece versus like half and half. So we'll see what happens as the season continues. Like I said, I'll probably just wait till the season is done and then I'll just binge it and just to see what happens. But I am curious. And once again, this was the first stop. Let's be honest, with this game, this was step #1, and everybody was freaking out. It's like, man, you guys you don't even love those other people, but you're going to. And then we'll see what happens. But those are my thoughts on all things The Last of Us Season 2/Part 2 for now. Like I said, I'm probably just gonna wait till the season ends and just binge everything. That's what I've been doing a lot for pretty much everything I've been watching lately. It's like, I'll just wait till the end. But I had to see this. This is the part where I was like, I gotta see the swing. I gotta see the swing. So enjoyed that. Oh, I almost forgot to mention this. Absolutely loved. My favorite thing that they did was the fact that they had Ashley Johnson doing Through the Valley. That was honestly probably my favorite thing that they changed in the entire episode. I was like, oh, this is like absolutely beautiful. Like, I absolutely love that part 100%. I couldn't believe it. I hadn't even thought about it when I saw the title of the episode. And I was like, holy crap. Like, you know, I also haven't listened to that song in a minute, but I do like the song that they play. And I was like, oh, that was amazing. And then, you know, cutting through with all the characters and everything that's happening, that was a phenomenal ending. I loved them using that song. So very excited to see how things happen moving forward. I am very curious. My second biggest thing, what is the change for Isaac? He's got to be more important because he did nothing in the game. So that's the other thing where I'm like, I want to see what happens there. Also, Lev and Yara, I don't know how the F that's gonna play out because the characters are so, and this is the element of like Abby and Ellie and how the actresses look. They do both look still very young and also skinny, and I'm like, what the F is like Lev and Yara gonna look like if this is what Abby looks like? They have to get like actual kids. So I'm curious how that's gonna turn out, but we'll love to know your thoughts on all things The Last of Us. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about the episodes, the changes, the things that they kept the same. We'd love to know your favorite parts about all that stuff. But in general, where the F are we headed for The Last of Us Season 2 and Season 3? So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.